There's also been lately those who came in from Central America on a special parole program, the Haitians, the Venezuelans, the Nicaraguans. Essentially, their time runs out um, by the third week of next month because their status has been revoked. So that also creates another set of dilemmas for them. I just mentioned that in passing, but I don't know if there's anybody in that situation because those special parole programs do not apply to Ghana. So you have people who came in, they came in as visitors and they've overstayed. My suggestion is people in that situation talk to a lawyer. Doing nothing is not an option because as you've heard in the news media and seen in the news media, they have this periodic occasions where the Department of Homeland Security goes around and they round up people. Sometimes you're driving and they'll stop and you'll find a roadblock. And in Arizona, it's quite widespread because you guys are a border state. So their presence of DHS officials are all over the place. So that's something that you need to do. Consider, talk to a lawyer, get your questions answered as to what your options are. When you know your options, then it makes it easier for you to begin to work out a plan to regularize your stay. On the other hand, if you play ostrich and stick your head in the sand and hopes that it goes away, let me remind you that we're going to be with this administration for the next 4 years, and 4 years is a long time. So don't be caught left-footed. Just make sure that you are equipped with the right information, get a consultation, find out what it is you can do and what it is that you can't do. And there are a lot of options for students. As long as you're a student and you're still here, you're good. If you're about, make sure, this is where I would emphasize for the students, make sure that you get to know your professors, because there is a sort of a Ghanaian thing. It comes from the way we were raised. So when we are in institutions, the professors do not know us. And it's all in the name of, I'm okay, I can be an island. But then when you need an internship, who gets the information about the internships? It's the same professors who get these internships. For example, I wound up at the International Monetary Fund because I used to work as a research assistant for my professor. He liked my work and he found me my job at the IMF. I worked there as an intern and then later on they hired me full-time. And then I stayed there, right? And so your professors are a very, very good resource as far as knowing what opportunities are there. Also talk to your alumni offices. They have a good resource list of job openings and where your alumni are. That's one of the things that schools do very, very well in this country. They're always tracking their alums and making sure that they don't forget the school that gave them their jump. And so when there is an opportunity and you have two people, well, they'll look to their alum and see if you're qualified to get that position. Make sure you also network. Don't just get caught up in, I'll stay in my corner because mom and dad says, hey, don't get into trouble. Don't get into trouble doesn't mean you shouldn't explore. You should use, you're in a new environment, so learn whatever you can learn about your environment, learn about what opportunities exist, and then when the international students offices, to make sure you are in contact with them, because sometimes they have very good information on internships. Sometimes you also have their, I forget the name of the office, but most schools have an office where if there are jobs, they would route career development offices. They would route all that through them. And if companies want to come in to interview people for summer jobs or internships, they are the gatekeepers. So make sure that you mingle, get to know people, make yourself personable. If people don't know you, they're not going to recommend you for anything. And the worst thing a professor can do for you is to give you a lukewarm recommendation. Oh, yes, I know Jane. She was in my class, but Jane was always quiet, never answered any questions, didn't engage, didn't take advantage of their office hours. I'll share a little secret with you. My dad shared that with me when I was going off to college. He said, look, you have to seek out your professors. Even after you have read or understood what they have taught you, go to their office hours. The office hours are important because it helps you to understand how they analyze problems. And if a professor sees you analyzing a problem that he or she has given you in the way that they are accustomed to analyzing it themselves, then you find out that you get drawn to them. And there are many occasions I remember my professor told me things that he later on called me to tell me, yes, I was being dubious. I just wanted to check your pulse and see whether or not you were teachable. So sometimes our professors can behave that way. They just want to see what kind of person is in their class, all right? And if you're somebody who's open to advice and direction, they will back you to the hilt. And so that's something that I suggest that you take advantage of. Yes, sometimes we're very shy, but this is a time to gradually shake off the shyness, all right? And as my dad used to tell me, don't worry about it. You go in there, ask a question, the answer of which you already know. The whole idea is to develop a rapport with your professors. And as you do that, you realize that it will go beyond, I have a question. They'll call you, oh, Jane, oh, Anne, oh, Tom. There's this internship that came across my desk, because you're constantly in their consciousness because of the frequent interaction. And they'll draw your attention to those things. And sometimes they will push you. They'll say, go ahead and apply for this. I'll give you a recommendation. Sometimes they won't tell you that, but they'll just give you the opportunity and tell you where to find it. If they hear anything, they'll just give it to you. So you should also be very proactive. And just remember that in those types of situations, they're putting their goodwill at your disposal. So make sure that you always make them proud. All right. So that, in a nutshell, is what I want to talk about as far as the broad overview. I think that people are pregnant with a lot of questions. So let's open it up and then let's take some questions so that I can address specific concerns, worries, anxieties that individuals may have, so that we don't keep the level of the discourse so general. Thank you.
Okay, so the floor is open now. If you have a question, you can show your hand, or if you are in this room, you can show your hand. Then give you the microphone. Okay.
Hello. Yeah, Prof.
Yes.
Good. I'm now a citizen of America.
Yes, sir.
American man. Yes, American man speaking now. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, my question is about my two boys who are left in Ghana. But I came here in 2019.
Okay.
Yes, immediately I came, I had to file for them.
Uh-huh.
I had a letter that they have received my
Your petition.
my petition or whatever. Since then, I've not heard anything from them. So now that I'm a citizen, do I have to do anything again, or have to inform them that now, hey, guys, I'm now an American person, so you should make sure that you process my petition. So
Okay.
what do I have to do next? Or do I have to wait? Or yes.
Then I'm going to ask you a few questions to sort of to give me a little bit more information. How old are the boys now?
Well, they are between 37 and 35 now.
Okay. And you filed for them when you were a green card holder, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what you need to do is to take the receipts for your two boys, okay? Yes. When you file the petition, the form I-130, they send you a receipt telling you we got your application, thank you, and you paid so much by way of application fees. If you take a look at the receipt, at the top left-hand corner, there is something called a receipt number. There's a series of numbers. Sometimes it starts with IOE, sometimes it starts with CS, it's a bunch of NRB, depends on where they finally process it. So that's what those prefixes refer to. Now, what you do is you write them a letter and inform them that you are now a citizen, and give them a copy of your citizenship certificate, your naturalization certificate. What they will do is that they will pull they're basically two piles. You have the pile for citizens filing for their dependents, and then you have green card holders filing for their dependents. In your case, the application needs to be moved from the green card pile to the citizenship pile. Now, additional questions would also be whether or not they are married. If they are married, it will take a much longer time. If they're not married, then what will happen is that they'll start processing it immediately. They move it from the green card pile to the citizenship pile. So that's the one step that you would need to take.
Thank you very much, Prof.
You're welcome.
So today I'm going to inform them that I'm now I'm not a citizen. Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if it delays a little bit, don't fret, because ever since the pandemic, they lost a lot of staff, so they're now bringing on board new people, newly trained, and there's a very huge backlog which has been created because of the pandemic. Because even though they shut down, they were still receiving applications. People like us were still filing because we were supposed to go to work and do that. And so that's part of the delay, but they will surely come. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the question. The next hand I see is Karen. We'll give you the opportunity to ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Kofi, I don't know if it's Dr. but Mr. Kofi. So my question is quite specific to my case. Because I am an F1 visa holder, and my visa expires in 2026, which is next year, so June of 2026.
Okay.
Now, there's I think, a level of worry amongst those of us who are going to have ours expire next year, because if we're making plans of traveling, the rumor in the air, what's flying in the air, is that we shouldn't get out of the country if you're nearing expiration. But then if it doesn't expire until June of next year and one wanted to travel in December, how advisable would it be to go outside the country when your visa would expire within like 6 months of your arrival in Ghana?
Well, okay. Let me answer it in two ways. All right. You're a student, so chances are, like most of us who came to school here as students, we miss home. The familiar sights and sounds of mom and smells of mom's good cooking, we miss that. So sometimes we want to go home. It's okay to go home, but make sure your paperwork is in order. All right? As long as you're not going to go and be out there for an inordinate amount of time, like 6 months. I mean, you're in school, so chances are you're probably going home for about a month or so, and then you come back. Now, what you need to understand is that the visa is good only for purposes of entering the United States. Okay? When you enter, they give you an electronic I-94, which is the document that governs your period of authorized stay while you're in the United States. So most of the time, students, F1 students, will get an I-94 with the inscription D/S, which means duration of stay. So it means that as long as you have that F1 status, you can stay here.
Okay.
Okay, that's what the DS stands for. Now, I said I was going to answer it in two ways. Some people have no business going home. All right? So, for those people who have no business going home, the decision to go home has to be weighed against what exactly is the purpose of the trip. If grandma is sick and you've been told they're not sure grandma will make it, and you want to go get your last hugs and be blessed and say your goodbyes and just get some closure with the prospect of her being lost, in my book, I think that's a very good reason.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the reason should drive why you want to hop on a plane. Yes, one of the things that I will also suggest to you, if you decide you want to go home, all the airports do not have the same protocols. Okay, so you fly from Ghana, let's say the plane takes you to New York, okay, and then you connect from New York, and then you come to Phoenix, depending on the flight. Or they'll send you from, okay, so Ghana, you go through Paris, then from Paris, okay, let's pick a spot somewhere to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Phoenix. The more circuitous your route is, the more likely you're going to face more questions. Okay? So, as much as possible, try and get as direct a route as you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay? But other than that, the fact that your visa is going to expire in 2026, you have plenty of time. We're just in March. So you can go home for the summer and load up on the essentials. When we came here, there were no African stores, so you don't have to load up on a whole lot, but that's something that you want to consider. If you need to travel, don't go. But if you do need to, make sure your documentation is in order.
Yeah, and one last thing too. You mentioned carrying your green card or a certain documentation if you were a citizen, etc. I didn't catch anything for the F1 visa holders.
So for the F1 visa holders, you can just take a picture of your F1 visa in your passport.
All right.
Okay? And then, yeah, that's usually good enough.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. I don't see any hand yet, but there's a hand behind me. Oh, okay, yes.
Thank you very much. I have two questions.
Yes, sir.
I think there was an executive order. I'm trying to look for the number. I think it's order 14159 that says protecting the American people against invasion, and I think it's taking effect on April 11th. That says that if you are a non-U.S. citizen, you have to register with I'm not too sure if it's the USCIS.
Yeah,
and so
with the USCIS.
I wanted to find out if that applies to F1 visas too. That's my first question.
Well, the executive order applies to individuals who have never been fingerprinted along the process. Okay, so it's there are some people who cross the border were never fingerprinted, but for F1s, for example, they fingerprint you when you come in, so they have the details on you. For F1s, they fingerprint you. They've tagged you with a CVIS number, so they know where you are. So you don't have to worry about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my second question is in relation to what Karen asked. A friend tells me she has her visa, which is going to expire this year, but her I-20 is going to expire next year. So the I-20 is August 2026, and the visa is August 2025. But this person, because she has a master's already, has applied for the national interest waiver.
Okay.
However, because the visa is expiring, this person wants to go and renew the visa. But because she has made an immigration intent through the national interest waiver, this person is scared as to whether or not to go and do the renewal, because when you apply for a new visa, you have to fill the DS-160, and they will ask you whether you've made an immigration intent. And in this case, you can't say no, because if you say no, that will be lying, and that can get you banned. And when you say yes to, there's a probability of you being denied because you are on a non-migrant visa, but you have made an immigration intent. So in this situation, what would you advise the person to do?
Well, I mean, if the only reason why the person wants to go outside is to try to renew her visa, all those issues you've raised will come up, okay? Because you have one file, everything goes into that file. So for somebody like that, I'll say sit put, wait for the outcome of your NIV stuff, and then you're fine. Yep. And if they don't approve it, because the visa is just to enter in a non-immigrant visa status. Okay, it's a license. It's not a right. All right? But once you're in, so think of it conceptually, as I usually tell my students, tell them, look, you've entered the Jerusalem gate. You always wanted to go to heaven. You've entered the Jerusalem gate. You just have to focus on the praise and worship inside. Don't worry about the barbarians at the gate. Okay? So enjoy the benefits in there. She has an opportunity to change her status through the national interest waiver. Pursue that and make sure that you put in a good application. Make sure that you're able to distinguish yourself as an individual and articulate very, very clearly why it is in the national interest of the United States for you to be given a green card and what your contributions have been and where that is likely to take you. Right? So instead of just trying to sort of, it's like trying to play two sides of the same fence. Okay. You know, the folks, and I remember there was a drunk who always, when he was sober, used to come to my grandmother's store, and one of his favorite lines was always, so sometimes you have to focus on one thing. Stay focused, put all your energies in that one, because that would open a much bigger door with greater opportunities. Because if you're getting close to the end of your program and you're leaving, you're going to go and get, unless you have another program on queue that you're going to go to, it becomes self-defeating because you form the immigrant intent, but then the visa you're going for would not be the proper visa for the intent that you have formed. And therefore, there's a high likelihood that that person will be denied the visa because they would say, well, look, this is not a proper use of this particular visa. There's no school on the horizon that she's going to go back to, or even say she's going to go for a doctorate. On the other hand, if she decides that, okay, fine, let me apply for a doctorate, then even with that, she will have to just simply do the transfer here, okay? And then when she has started school and somewhere down the line, she needs to go out, get a letter from the International Students Office, copy of her I-20, all the necessary documentation. When she gets to Accra, then she can get the stamp, because you can't get a visa stamp here. Okay? So I hope I've not muddied the waters, but tried to be as clear as possible.
I think we have a hand up for Samsung SM.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I don't know if you can hear me. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, now my name is Frempo. I'm currently in Memphis. I want to ask this question for myself. With regards to the letter of no objection for a student like me that came with a Ghanaian funding, I'll be graduating hopefully December 2025. When do you think is the best time for me to put in an application for that letter of no objection? And yeah, that's the very first question. Then number two, like I mentioned, I'll be graduating this December. I don't want to be out of status. Unfortunately, the program which I'm doing in my school is not as STEM related, so I would have a year OPT. I don't want to make use of my OPT now, but I want to transition to a PhD or certification program. My question is, how is the transition like? Is it as easy as I would request for an F1 I-20 if I was to come in right from Ghana?
No, the way you do it is a little different. Let me take your first question first, because it's a straightforward one. The no objection letter, you typically will have to get a letter from the scholarship secretariat, okay, because you're government funded, and or the agency in Ghana that funded your scholarship, saying that they have no objection for you not to return. All right. Now, you know as well as I do, things sometimes with the civil service in Ghana move at a snail's pace. So if you leave it to the last minute, it will not help you. So you want to start early and get somebody, a point person, somebody that you trust at home who can do the follow-up and the legwork to make sure that they can follow up on making sure that that letter is issued, so you know where you stand. Because with that, you can change your situation. So I presume that you must be on a J1 visa with a restriction then.
No, currently I'm on F1 visa, but Doc, I want to add on, would it be a hindrance if I don't have the letter of no objection and I want to transition to a PhD program? Would it be a hindrance?
No, it shouldn't be a hindrance. I mean, if the ones that usually have problems are the J1 students, because they come as researchers or they come as students, but they are funded by, say, USAID, USIS, right? Or some department of the United States government where they provide some bilateral assistance program. So they will train you. Now, when that happens, for them, the idea is that you come, you study, then you go back home and serve a 2-year bond, okay? So that your country gets the benefit of the education that they gave you here. That's all part of the bilateral exchange. But if you are coming here on an F1, the clue to whether or not you're subject to any restriction would be to look on your I-20. You look on the left-hand corner, the bottom 4 or 5 boxes. It will tell you if there are any restrictions. The form is, I believe, is form IAP 66. All right. They set it out there. If they haven't checked the box, if you're subject to the 2-year residency requirement, they'll check a box because there are 2 boxes there, subject to, not subject to. But if you're on a straight F1, you shouldn't have that problem at all. What you should do is to go ahead and make sure that you get admission to the PhD program, and then do the transfer, that you're moving from one school to the other. And usually the International Students Office will guide you with that to make sure that your transition is seamless.
Oh, okay, Doc. Please, how about the second one? Transitioning from my current master's to a PhD, even though I'm on a scholarship, is it that easy?
I think Yeah, it's easy. I mean, I think what I did was I answered one, I didn't identify the second one, and I lumped it together, the answer in one. But it's essentially the same thing. If you're finishing a master's and you're going to go into a PhD program, make sure you secure the admission to the PhD program. Okay, do that early enough so that your school can transfer your CVIS file to the new school. Okay? And once they do that, you're good. And then you start classes and you do what you need to do. Then, when you need to go home, when you're going home, you take copies of your I-20 and your proof of how you're paying your funds, the sponsorship documentation and all of that stuff. You take it to the embassy. You make an appointment from here so that when you go, it's a quick turnaround, and they'll process you. One little trick, make sure you do well, because what they've been doing, the embassies have been doing lately, is that they ask for your transcript to see how well you used your time here. If you have mediocre grades, there's a chance that they could deny you even though the school has admitted you. Okay, so I've seen that happening. Yeah, because people come around and, you know, they don't really apply themselves the way they should. And I recently got a case like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome.
Mr. Joseph Anane. Hello, can you hear us? Mr. Anane? Okay, all right. So maybe let's give Dr. Usidom a chance, and then Mr. Simpi again. And if anybody else has a question, then we allow that person.
All right, so thank you so much for the information. My quick question is there any situation when they can revoke a person who has naturalized, revoke the citizenship?
Okay. Thank you. That's a good question. Yes, citizenship can be revoked, but you have to go through what is called a denaturalization hearing. It's not something that is done very easily. For you to lose your citizenship that way, the citizenship should have been procured by fraud. So in the few cases where people have been denaturalized, they're not many, but they're there. People who were members of the Nazi party, they came in, and sometimes people fell through the cracks. Certain security protocols weren't followed for them, or they misrepresented some material fact. Johnny is called Joe, and all of a sudden he says he's called Johnny because 20 years ago he was Joe and he got deported. They fingerprint you. These things are all sitting in databases. So now that all the databases are linked up, those things get periodically flagged and they come up. Yeah.
So
In the last administration, they had talked about setting up a denaturalization task force, and they did that, and there were a few cases of individuals, but the bulk of people who get naturalized don't lose their naturalization.
Okay, so we're talking about fraud. Say somebody, came in, claimed asylum, and went through the green card, got to citizenship, and then, something happens, maybe they go back and look and forward. There was no, you were in no asylum, situation at all. Maybe your asylum was based on, falsehood. Can they revoke your citizenship based on that?
They can, because it's like a pile of bricks. If the foundation is faulty, the superstructure cannot stand. All right? You obtain the green card by false pretenses and deception. Right? So that's the first one. So that is very clear. The story didn't add up. And so the story collapses. Once that story collapses, whatever is built on it will have to come down.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay.
But let me just add quickly, in cases such as the storyline that you described, these things typically will come out if somebody who knew that the story was not real went behind and then squealed. Because they have so many asylum cases, and the world is in trauma, and a lot of people are experiencing it.
Okay, Prof, back to my question, the first one, about my two boys.
Yes, sir.
Is there a specific form that I have to fill, or I just write to them? Do we have any specific form?
There is no specific form. You just write a letter to the USCIS office that issued your receipt. The address is usually at the bottom.
Okay.
And then you make reference to the receipt numbers. You tell them you filed an I-130, a petition for your two boys. You put their names, and for each name, if you look at the top left-hand corner, usually it's at the second box. There's a series of numbers there. It's marked receipt number. You quote that receipt number for each child, and you are basically informing them to update their records because you have become a citizen. And attached is a copy of your naturalization certificate. And that's it. Short letter. Not more than 6 lines.
We have about 15 minutes more to go, and I'll give chance to Kenneth. Kenneth, you can ask your question. Kenneth, I see your hand up. Can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Question, yeah.
All right. So my name is Kenneth, and my question is pretty simple. So I'm actually on J1 visa, and even though I have some years left to go, this is my second year. So for us, we have 3 years with an option of renewing additional 2, so it becomes 5. So, Doc, what is the best advice or the best step I would take if I have an intention of, after my 5 years on the J1, I want to transition to a different visa, that is, let's say, the H1B1. And I've already spoken to my school, and they have intentions of retaining me or helping me to get the H1B. But the only feeling is that my school doesn't have more information about how they will go about the H1B visa. What do you think is the best step that I should take?
Okay. I mean, I'm sure your school has, most schools like yours would have an international student office. And they typically liaise with different kinds of immigration lawyers in your state. Sometimes most schools also have their own legal counsel. So they could explore that. Otherwise, they'll have to pick one off the shelf, Google one that's within your state, a reputable one, and they would then assist you in making the transition.
Thank you. I wish I can see more hands, because this is an opportunity for you. So let us use it. Ask questions that we have and have him explain it to us. Especially the students. Okay, I'll ask one question myself. There's a hand up somewhere? Yes. Is somebody's hand up? Mr.
Yeah,
Ampoma,
was that Mr. Ampoma?
Go ahead, Mr. Ampoma. Yours is more important than... Mr. Ampoma, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. Please, I would want to know how I can waive my J1 2 years, what do you even call it? That in 2 years you're supposed to go back to your country.
Yeah.
How do I waive that?
Okay, so to waive that, there are a couple of ways. You can do that by having the agency that sponsored you issue a no objection letter, that they don't have any objection with you staying over, they don't need your services, and that's gone. That will be sent to the State Department. That's one way of doing it. The other way that I have seen it done, it's usually people get married and then they raise the issue and you essentially tally the hardship to the U.S. citizen spouse if the waiver is not granted. Yeah. But the more popular one is the no objection letter from the agency. If it's a bilateral aid, then usually it's part of the U.S. government assistance as bilateral assistance program with Ghana, where they would agree that, okay, we'll issue X number of scholarships for individuals to come and study in this particular field. So the beneficiary agency then has to basically agree to it. And you'll find that information usually on your there's a form IAP 66, which details whether you're subject to the 2-year rule or whether you're not subject to the 2-year rule. Because not all J visas are subject to the 2-year rule.
Thank you very much. With the second option, I'm already married, so I can pick that. And with the first option, what if I'm denied with that? What is the way forward? Because I'm with my.
If you're denied if they deny that, that's it. They said they need you, then you've got to go serve. You become like a soldier who's been drafted for 2 years. So you have to go and do it.
Okay, so which means that right after spending the 2 years in Ghana, you can still come back?
Oh, yeah, you can. If you're married to a U.S. citizen, they can file a petition for you. And then, yeah.
I already said that I'm married. So right after spending the 2 years in Ghana, how do I file and come back?
How do you file and come back? Well, I mean, then, wait, you're married. Is your wife a U.S. citizen?
No, a Ghanaian.
Okay, so then you've got to go a different route to come back. You have to then look at trying to get a sponsorship via, say, the H-1B program. So before you leave here, make sure you make some contacts with some good companies, and wherever it is that you've been opportune to work, that you distinguish yourself, and they always think about you. And when you leave, you stay in touch. Make good friends within the organization, and when it's time, some of them would be willing to sponsor you for an H-1B, and then if you're lucky and you win the lottery, then you're good to go.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
I saw some questions in the
In the chat,
chat.
let's see.
Is that the question that has been? You have a question? Okay, let me ask one quick question and then I will leave it to you. The question I have for the students is that during the campaign time of President Trump, he said that he wants to give foreign students with higher attainment opportunity. Is there anything that has been signed in that respect that will help the students to, you know, apply for extension of visa or use the HB1? What is that visa? The visa that allows them to work here.
No, nothing has been, it was part of the campaign,
It was part of the campaign. Nothing has
but
been done.
nothing has materialized yet.
Prof, I'm back. Anyway, so I came here on a J1 visa as a physician trainee. And,
Yeah.
At the end of my training, I had the option to go back home for 2 years and apply and come back on whatever visa you wanted to. But there was also, they had these waivers that if you opted to work in underserved area, they would
Yeah.
waive it for you. Do you have, because we have at least a couple of music teachers among us who are good, do they have any such opportunities for them, say serving in an underserved area and getting the 2-year waiver?
Well, the physicians, yes, there is a program. For musicians, there is no such program, but the musicians can go through what is called an R1 program, where they are affiliated with a church, and then the church sponsors them for an R1 visa. Okay, and then through that process, the R1 can go up to 5 years. There's an initial one which is issued, and it can be issued for a year or 2 years, and then a subsequent renewal for the remainder of the 5 years. All right. And so during that time, they can then file a form which the church basically stands behind and say, look, we love these guys. They're very good. They help with our worship. And as a result of that, we're willing to sponsor them. And then that petition is filed. And then when it's approved, then they qualify for a green card. So it's, yeah, for musicians, that would be the route.
That's a very useful information. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Do we have any? No question? Okay. Yes. You have a question? Okay. Okay, yeah. Oh, Gloria? There's a hand on Zoom. Gordon? Godwin?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry.
you can, yes.
Yes. So thank you. My name is Godwin. I have 2 questions. One is, do we actually have a number of days left on the visa to renew, or we can actually renew before the expiring date?
You can renew your visa before the expiration date.
So if I understand correctly, that means there's no specific number of days before the expiring date, right?
No.
Okay. And the other one, I don't know whether if you have answered that one, whether we can actually renew our visas in the US. So far as we are students, I don't know if school is not, we are not in vacation, can we renew the visas without going to?
Your visa renewals always go to the embassy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's always done at the embassy.
Okay.
You can acquire a new status Okay, so if you came in and you were doing your master's and you finished, you want to go and do a doctorate, get the admission, move on, they'll transfer your CVS file, everything is seamless, you get your admission, you start, and you're there. Your paperwork will be covered. As long as you do it before your visa lapses. I mean, your period of, before you finish your program, it's not about the visa at this point. So you have to create a little bit of an overlap. So if you know you want to start something in the fall, by now you should be applying so that you know. And then it would make things very, very easy for you. And then once you've started the school, then if you have a need to go home, then you do. I mean, I remember when I came here, I didn't go back home. I just, my father kept calling me and telling me, just remember that there's nothing to come home to. So sit put and finish. So I didn't go home until I was completely done.
Okay, so that means if your R20 is active and your visa expires, are you okay? Are you allowed to stay in the United States?
You are allowed to stay. The visa controls only your point of entry.
Okay.
Yes. And then your I-94, which is now electronic, you can get that from cbp.gov. And then you can print out your I-94 from there. That will tell you, usually for students like you, you'll find that you have an entry date, and then the end date will have D/S, which means duration of stay. You're good as long as you are in that status as a student.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Akosua Nyantechi, you can ask your question.
Hi, my question is a little bit in a different vein. I'm just interested in hearing your perspective on the constitutionality and legality of some of the executive orders that you mentioned, and some of the actions that have been taken, like the proposed revocation of green card holder status and things like that. Just curious on your view on that.
Well, this administration is doing a lot of things that are not legal, but part of it is to test what the appetite of the system is. That's how I see it. All right. So the analogy they use is flood the zone. There's always something outrageous that follows. So if you follow the pattern of the previous, what we usually call Trump 1.0, it was exactly the same thing. There's always something that's coming. And a lot of their executive orders are being tied up in court over, there's a lot of litigation going on regarding the constitutionality, the scope, the authority to do that. For example, the first one, we all knew that it would not fly, which was the birthright citizenship, except people took it to the extreme, and then they read the language of the Constitution in a way as to serve what the administration wanted to accomplish. But so far, they've lost on all rounds, and we'll see what the Supreme Court comes up with. And as to whether or not green card holders, with green card holders having their status revoked, yeah, that happens all the time. It's nothing new that was introduced by this administration. If green cards are issued and they do not follow a particular protocol, then yes, they would be revoked. So, for example, if somebody somehow lies about something and then it becomes evident later on, let's take the more common example. People get married to US citizens, they get their green cards, and then they get the 2-year green card, and then they get on to the 10-year card. They jump to before they get to citizenship. Something comes up. Usually somebody stumbles on information that would lead them to believe that there was more to this marriage than, meets the eye. They would investigate it. They'll send investigators out. Okay, this is where the wife said she used to live before she got married. Go talk to her. Go talk to him. Gather the information. Put a report together. And based on that report, they would revoke the green card. Now, with this administration, the revocation is not coming only from that angle, but it's also coming from green card holders who have traveled overseas. The statute says you're not allowed as a permanent resident to stay out of the country for more than 180 days. Okay, so that's basically about roughly about 6 months. So if you go and say, oh, look, I miss home, I'm going to stay with mom for I'm going to stay for a year because I spoke to Johnny and Johnny told me that, green card holders can live outside the country for up to a year. Well, there is that bad information floating around. I hear that a lot, but it's not a year. Then there is a presumption when you return that you have abandoned your domicile, which is the place where you normally live. Okay, so people like that at the airport, sometimes the immigration officer, it's quite standard when you come in and you're a green card holder, they'll ask you, where did you go and how long have you been gone for? They know when you left because they have the flight manifest on which you left. They just run your name. So when you hand them over your passport and they swipe it, the barcode pulls up your travel history. It's right in front of them. So they can see that you've been gone for a long time. And then they would ask you a few questions and send you to what they call secondary inspection, where you get quizzed about your trip and why you stayed so long. Sometimes people have good reasons why they stayed so long. Sometimes they're sick and they weren't cleared by their doctors to fly back. They were in no ship to come back on a long flight. So they would look at the circumstances and then they'll make a decision. And in other cases where you need an aggressive officer, they're going to give you a form called Form I-407. And that form basically says that you're renouncing your green card. And so those with green cards, if you find yourself in those kinds of situations, do not sign that form ever. Just ask for a right to appear before a judge. You have a better chance of retaining your card in front of a judge than having an immigration officer make you sign the Form I-407.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just to also, I feel like one of the biggest things I'm getting from this, to summarize a lot of it, is like, understand your status and read up on the law so you know exactly what is applicable to you in a way that you may not have had to do before this administration. I think that's important.
Know your status.
Yeah, know your status and know what the rules are.
And everything that surrounds it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was just my 2 cents I wanted to add. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there is a question. It says, please, can you renew your F1 visa before the expiration date? I have 2 years left on my master's visa, but I'm about to start a PhD, which is about 5 years. When is the right time to renew the visa? All right, thank you. This is from...
Okay, I see this. This is from Fortune. Well, I think we addressed this earlier. When you come in and you have a master's and then you want to transition, okay, the visa is just to allow you to enter the United States. Okay, so you're already here. So what you should worry about is securing that admission and funding for that PhD program. Okay, and then the International Students Office will do the transfer of your CVIS file to that school so that there's no break in between. And they'll issue you with the necessary paperwork. As for the visa, you will, if you ever have reason to leave the United States during that doctoral program, or if you want to do that before then you can go home and then you can go and apply for that visa at the U.S. Embassy with all your documentation, your I-20, proof of funding, all that stuff.
Prof, I have a quick follow-up on that. Are you able to apply through, not through, let's say we are Ghanaians, but if you decide to go through, say, Canada, you go outside of the U.S., Mexico, Canada, are you able to do that in any of those countries rather than going to Ghana?
Yes, you can, but it depends on the embassy, because sometimes what used to happen, it used to be a very popular way of dealing with these visas issues for people in exactly the circumstances that we talked about. But the embassies found out, some of the embassies realized that they were now beginning to carry extra loads of people, servicing extra people than they were used to. So some embassies don't accept them and some do. So it'll be a question of, you know, talking to your lawyer and he can set it up with the U.S. Embassy, and then you can go in there and get your visa and just do a round trip.
Okay, thank you. There is another question. It's basically asking about asking political questions. I think there is an incident of a student who has been doing well in school, is here on a full ride, but then he got a notification that he's supposed to leave the US. And the only thing that he said he thinks is wrong is that he's been posting political memes on social media. So I guess the question is, what would be your advice to our students? Can they ask questions on posting, can they comment on political stuff online? Or like what
No,
is your, yeah.
this administration is dead serious on that. Okay. At the beginning, we talked about this student from Tufts who got picked up. Yeah, be careful. Know your environment. A lot of people take advantage of social media being this faceless forum where they can say whatever they want and do whatever they want. Just remember the advice your grandmother would have given you. Remember, you carry the family name. So don't do anything that will cause trouble. Okay? I remember a line from Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. He says, we are sojourners in this land. If any good comes, let us have our share. If any wars come, let it go to the owners of the land, for they know the gods to appease. It's their land. They set their rules. The past administration was very tolerant of a lot of things. This administration is different. So if I were you, fine. Go to social media, read about it, keep your thoughts to yourself. Because some of these things, there is a new protocol which has just been introduced. Even green card holders are going to be required to hand over their social media handles, okay? And they're going to use that to root out a whole lot of people. Okay, but if you're a citizen, you have nothing to worry about. But if you're on a visa, you're a student, I'll say stay away from the politicking. Okay, I know some people are very politically conscious, but focus on your studies and put yourself in a position where you're solid. And then at that point, you can express all the vitriol that you want to. But at that point, you're not vulnerable.
A follow-up question. There are two, but I would like to do the follow-up question first. From Karen, it says, as a follow-up to the previous question, within how much time do we start an F1 visa renewal? A year, 6 months? So.
A year is too early. You know, any time from 6 months is fine. But then remember that you're going to have to go back there. So it goes back to the first thing I said. Do you really need to be going home? And if your visa hasn't expired, they're not going to bother you.
Okay, I think we have Frimpong, and then we'll take one question from that has been posted by Frederick. So Frimpong.
Yeah, but please, I want to ask a follow-up with regards to the visa renewal for students. Is it really necessary to have a visa renewed when you have had your service being transferred, you have a new I-20? Is it really necessary to have a visa renewal? Because I thought with the new I-20, that could grant you your access from the port of entry if you want to go back home.
Yeah, your new I-20 signals that you're in a new institution, you're in a different program, but you have no license to re-enter this place. You'll have to go to the embassy and apply for the visa to be put in your stamp so that you can show it to the airline staff and they'll let you on the plane. And then when you get to immigration here, they'll look at it and then they'll cross-reference the information that you've given them, and they'll stamp your passport and let you in.
So the question is it necessary to have it?
It's not. I use myself as an example. When I came in, my father said, sit down. Don't go flying back and forth. There's nothing here. Stay there, study, finish what you need to finish. And that's what I did. So I stayed here, and I didn't go anywhere until I was done with my studies. So it's not necessary. But if you happen to, well, then yes, you're going to need a visa to re-enter. In that case, make sure you have the admission letter, proof of your funds, your I-20. If you've already registered for courses, course registration, get your old transcript, keep a copy of it, and then you approach the embassy and we're good to go. They'll process you.
Okay, one more question has been shared here. If you overstay your visa, can it impact your green card application?
I beg your pardon?
The question is from Frederick. He wants to know if you overstay your visa, can it impact your green card application?
It can. If you overstay your visa, it can in two ways. Let's look at the ways. So what visa are we talking about? If it's an F1 visa, okay, then you start accumulating unlawful presence. Okay? Now, the punishment for that when you leave is that you'd have problems coming back. If the period of overstay is less than 6 months, you're eligible for a 3-year ban. If it's more than 6 months, then you're subject to the 10-year bar. All right? But if such a person who's overstayed were to marry a U.S. citizen, that would cure it. If they don't leave, otherwise they'll have to file a waiver and make a case, a hardship case for why they need the hardship that the U.S. citizen spouse would suffer if they are denied. And they do deny them. You know, as long as they don't leave, they're okay. But when they leave, it's a bit of a fight to get the waiver approved. They approve them, but you really need to make a case for it.
Thank you so much, Prof. I have a question. I've been reading other people's questions. This is mine.
It's all right.
So we've heard that it is possible for the enforcement agents, the ICE, and those guys who have been assigned to remove people from the U.S. to come to places of worship and school.
Yep.
So I want to know, what is your professional opinion if, say, an ICE agent comes to the church and is requesting, like, what will be our best option? What do we do as a group when they show up?
Well, no exactly. Sometimes, okay, let me take the question this way. I'll break the question down into bite sizes so as to make it more applicable. Typically, what do they do when they show up? Typically, when an ICE officer shows up, they want to confirm your name. They want to confirm what country you're from. That's the issue of alienage. If they know your name, they can run that. If they know your alienage, they also know that you're not a U.S. citizen, which then would lead to the next question, which is, what's your immigration status? Sometimes they don't directly ask you for your immigration status. They ask you, where's your passport? All right, because with the passport, they will be able to glean the information that they're looking for. They'll see your visa in it. They'll see the period of authorized stay because it's stamped in it. And they'll reach the conclusion, 1, you're not a citizen of the United States. 2, you're present illegally. So as much as possible, the less said when you encounter an officer, the better. All right? Because you're either serving yourself up to them, or you just simply invoke your right against your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And you don't say anything else. And you just keep repeating you don't want to say anything that would incriminate yourself. And at that point, yeah, they might find a way to try and determine who is this person that we're talking to? Where is this person from? And is this person a citizen or is this person not a citizen? So that's the way of dealing with ICE. And if they come and your door is locked, well, what do? You don't open your door because they're banging on your door. If they tell you, which they sometimes engage in deceptive practices, they'll say, oh, we have a warrant. Make sure that the warrant is not signed by an immigration officer. Make sure that the warrant is signed by a judge. Okay? Because if you don't draw that distinction between that judicial warrant and an administrative warrant, then you could easily trample on your own rights just because you had the word warrant.
All right, thank you so much, Prof.
You're welcome.
A few other questions here from Sandra Wood. It says, so if your F1 visa expires and you have not traveled outside of the U.S., will it negatively affect you in any way while you are in the U.S.? In
No.
other words, as long as
It doesn't.
you don't leave the U.S., Are you fine?
As long as it's expired and you're still in the program and you're here, remember what I said. Your F1 visa is like the ticket to that big concert. Okay? And then your I-94 is the pass to the backstage to meet that star for the evening. Okay? So as long as you have that I-94 and you're still in that program, if you're a student, they're invariably going to mark it DS, duration of stay. And as long as you're still in status as a student, that's the most important thing. One controls your arrival at the airport and entry into the country. And then the second document gives you the ability to stay and study, which is your I-94, and how long you can stay in. That's why visitors, for example, who come in on the B1, B2 tourist visa, those ones, you typically give them 6 months. They need to get out before the 6 months or by the 6th month.
Okay, and there's one more question. I believe this is going to be the last one. Ethel wants to know that she recently replaced her passport because she was running out of the old passport was running out of pages, and the old passport is yet to expire. So the question is, at what point does she start using the new passport number for immigration processes?
Well, typically when you renew your passport, what happens is that the first one gets canceled, but they don't cancel the visa. So you staple the two together, because at the back of the new passport, they will cross-reference the passport number of the earlier passport. That's why you staple the two together. And you use the new one, because the new one cross-references the old one and it supersedes the old one.
Hello, I have a quick question.
Yes.
My name is Mills. This is more along the lines of the FATCA. I don't know if you're familiar with it, just to ask first.
What?
The FATCA, FATCA.
Yeah, FATCA, yeah.
Yeah. Looking specifically at FATCA and seeing the countries that have signed those agreements, different agreements, across the world. I wanted to know if you knew why Ghana hasn't agreed to it when most of the countries have, and specifically, even though Ghana hasn't agreed to it, there are some financial institutions that have been placed on the FFI list. So, what would be the requirements for them doing that? And back to the other question, why hasn't Ghana, and do you think they would be joining that?
I don't know why Ghana hasn't, but some of these the FATCA when it came out was a bit controversial, and some countries felt that they had been practically arm twisted into signing it, but it was all part of the architecture to shore up anti-money laundering controls. All right, and some governments still need some work done, putting in place the proper framework before they are allowed to sign, to meet all the requirements of the treaty. So I'm not sure why Ghana hasn't. I could look into it, but some banks are already essentially taking the position that, look, we're going to have to comply with it somewhere down the road, so we might as well begin. But it may not be sort of an official position of the government. Yeah.
Thank you. And
then to follow up on that, do you personally think it's in the best interest of the country to be on that list, especially garnering the fact that in certain institutions around the world, especially with scenarios that are occurring like this, individuals want to separate certain entities or certain asset classes by company or by individuality from access or control in that sense?
Well, the whole thing is that factor came up as a result of having so many tax havens, and these tax havens became a bastion of laundering dirty money. All right. So the OECD came up with its own set of rules, and in addition with the Bank for International Settlements, the G7 got involved. Okay, let's try and create a system where we can save the integrity of the world's banking system. And that's how we sort of arrived at this. The world has gotten way closer together as technology has continued to develop at lightning speed. I mean, if you look at how much the stock exchanges process on a daily basis, I don't think that it's something that is going to change by way of loosening it. And governments are also looking for ways in which to identify who's skirting their tax laws, and entering into different tax arrangements, which companies are doing what and which individuals are doing what. It's basically trying to erase that whole idea of anonymity. There's some amount of it still left. If you think of the history and the progression, you know, in the old days, in the 60s, when you heard that somebody had a Swiss bank account, it just sounded like something really, really novel and strange. But, you know, that's morphed into people now talking about Bitcoins and far more esoteric ways in which people and individuals and companies maintain their assets. So it's just part of the evolution of the financial system. And I think that at some point there'll be tighter regulation, because it seems that's where we're all headed.
Thank you. And one last question that was really profound. In your experience with the IMF, do you see, especially with this administration, a combination or coalescence with countries such as the BRICS nation, especially seeing ways in which the administration is now starting to embrace, like Russia and all these other countries that usually the United States foreign policy would stay away from?
Well, we're living in interesting times. If we'd talked about this 10 years ago, it would have been different. 5 years ago, it would have been different. We're really not, the U.S. foreign policy isn't that clearly defined at the moment. So my attitude at this point is a wait and see one, but it's very clear that there is a very conscious effort by the BRICS countries to break the stronghold that the dollar used to enjoy as an international reserve currency. And as more and more countries join the BRICS, and I think that we'll have some interesting times ahead. How the U.S. reacts to it will be another matter. At this point, we're in uncharted waters. But it's, and I think if you look at all these trade wars that are popping up on the horizon, looking at the way countries are coalescing, you know, the EU and Canada, Mexico, and then of course ASEAN is also sitting on the sidelines watching. So we're in for a lot of uncertainty, but maybe it's part of the genius of this administration. I don't know. I'll wait and see how it all unfolds, and how that would ultimately affect U.S. foreign and trade policy. Ultimately, if another regime takes over in the after this administration, we might roll back some things. Who knows? Nobody knows the future, but again, as long as the markets are not adversely affected, I think that we'll see some rollback. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. We have two last questions, and that'll be it. And I believe you are going to share your info with us, so if anybody wants to get in touch. But the last two questions, the first one is from Ogochuku, and Ogochuku wants to know, so if my visa has expired, but I am still a student, can I apply for the national interest waiver? That is the first question. If the visa has expired, but the person is still a student, can they apply for the national interest waiver? And
Yeah, you can.
And the last question is from Nana. Nana wants to know, he said, if I started a 1-year F1 program and was given a 1-year F1 visa, will I still be in status as an F1 when the visa expires, but I had changed my program to a 2-year program prior to the visa expiration, or in the same school?
Yeah, you should be fine. Yep.
Hello. Thank you so much, Prof.
You're welcome.
We don't have enough words to thank you for the time that you've spent with us this afternoon. I believe you have answered most of our questions. And those who still have questions, you can contact us. We can direct you to him, and I believe he will be very helpful to you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the church pastor, the church elders, and everybody here, we are much, much, much grateful for your time. And I'll talk to you afterwards. And anytime you happen to be in Phoenix on Saturday, please come visit. We want to have personal interaction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
It's
your
a pleasure.
Thank you. We appreciate it very much.
And we had very good questions. I'm glad that this format worked.
Okay, all right. Okay, Pastor, would you bless us before we leave?
Let us pray. Our dear Lord and our Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that we have got this opportunity with Prof to see all that is ahead of us, that he has been able to answer almost all our questions. We thank you so much. We want to pray for him that, Lord, you continue to endow him with wisdom, that he will be able to help others. As we are planning to leave, it's our prayer that you give us safe journey. Be with us, and as we enter into another week and another month, continue to bless us all. We thank you. In Jesus' name we have prayed. Amen.
Amen.
And for those of you who join us today, come visit us. We are in Phoenix, and we have more resources and programs of this nature. So you can, feel free to come and visit us. We will share our address on the chat. So, okay, thank you very much, and have a great evening, everybody. Okay, all right. Please remember we have games.